One of my favorite books of all time is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And I love this book because it explains the difference between what poor people do and what rich people do. And here's an example. In 2003, there was a young woman named Callie Rogers who won the lottery in Great Britain. She won $1.9 million, or million pounds, I guess. But after 10 years of spending that money on new cars, new houses, plastic surgery, she was only worth 2,000 pounds. She even contemplated taking her own life. She fell in such a big depression after blowing that money. Now, I want to contrast that with one of my favorite examples of wealth, who happens to be a friend of mine who's a millionaire as a teacher. You see, he makes $40,000 a year, but he's worth millions of dollars. Now, what's the difference between Callie Rogers and my teacher friend? And see, the difference is that rich people follow 3 simple rules. And the first rule is this: rich people buy assets and poor people buy liabilities. And here's what I mean. You see, there's 4 basic areas to personal finance. The first one is income, second one is expenses, third one is assets, and the fourth one is liabilities. Now, most people are only familiar with the first 2, income and expenses. Income, something like your job. That's how you take money and put it in your pocket. Expenses can be anything from food to rent to taxes, clothing, transportation, entertainment, things like that. That's where most people stop. But rich people invest in assets. And an asset is anything that appreciates in value and produces more cash that you can put in your pocket. And these are things like stocks, bonds, real estate, anything that produces an income. And the last thing are liabilities. Now, liabilities are anything that depreciates in value over time. I think of cars and cell phones because every time you go to buy a cell phone or a car, it loses value as soon as you drive it off the lot or as soon as you take it home. But here's how this quadrant works out in real life. See, most people have a job, and they use that job to pay for their expenses, and ultimately that takes money out of their pocket. Or most people will use that job to purchase liabilities, things like cars and cell phones. And then those turn into an expense, which again takes money out of their pocket. They don't become wealthy because they're too busy paying for that sort of lifestyle. Now let's contrast that with what rich people do differently. See, rich people, like my teacher friend, he uses his job to buy cash-producing assets. And so he'll use his income, his $40,000 a year salary, to purchase stocks or bonds or real estate, things that will put money back into his pocket. And by purchasing these assets, rich people produce passive income streams. These are things like dividends, royalty checks, rental checks. All of these different passive income streams amplify people's income. So you don't have to start with a lot of money to become rich. You just have to keep buying cash-producing assets. The second thing that rich people do that poor people do not is that rich people are financially literate. They understand exactly how to protect their money at tax time. And I have an example from a friend of mine who's a photographer. And she travels all around the state taking pictures of companies, taking pictures of families and of weddings and events. And she doesn't protect her money at tax time. So when I ask her and I say, hey, why don't you protect your money in a corporation? She says, well, I don't know how to do that. And see, most people are a little confused here. Most people think that a corporation is some big skyscraper in downtown, but really, that's not the case at all. A corporation is just a stack of papers that sits in a folder somewhere that tells the state to tax you differently. And so if you have no idea how to form a corporation to protect your money, just Google it. Because we live in an age when anything is Googleable and you're able to just go out and learn. So take the time to figure out how to be financially literate, Google how to form a corporation, and protect your money at tax time. The third rule that rich people follow is that rich people mind their own business instead of working for someone else's. So let's say you're an employee at a company, and let's say that you're working for $10 per hour. Now, if you provide your boss with $100 per hour worth of value, then your boss and the company is making $90 per hour off of you. But most people work with a bunch of people, and so you might have several other fellow employees. Each one of them might be making $10 an hour as well. So let's say there's 3 employees, each at $10 per hour. Well, then your boss and the company are making $300 per hour. Now, after paying their employees, that number goes to about $270 per hour. Now, your boss is then making a lot more money than you are. And that's what rich people understand, is they mind their own business. They scale their business instead of working for someone else to get rich. They get rich on their own. So let's just recap here. What do rich people do? Well, number 1, rich people invest in assets instead of liabilities. They buy assets that produce more cash instead of liabilities, which take cash out of their pocket. The second thing rich people do is that they understand financial literacy. Not only do they understand where their money is coming from, but they understand how to protect their money at tax time through forming corporations. And the third thing that rich people do differently is that they mind their own business instead of working for someone else's business. They understand that an employee provides more value than they're getting paid for, and so they seek to be the employer instead of the employee.